What is up, sexy people of the internet? It is Dave, it is Duncan back from Metal Epidemic for another album review. And for this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from ethereal alternative group SOM. The band's new album, Let the Light In, will be released on March 14th via Pelagic Records. After 8 years, SOM stand at a pivotal moment. 3 years after their critically acclaimed sophomore album, The Shape of Everything, and a year following the release of Faith, an ambitious EP of Depeche Mode covers, their forthcoming third full-length, Let the Light In, captures the band at its most introspective and adventurous. A study in contrasts, Let the Light In is simultaneously SOM's catchiest and heaviest record, pushing boundaries with the dissonance and noise while uncovering surprising moments of tranquility, the calm within the storm. Let the Light In sees SOM turn their sights inward towards our most primal impulses, seeking solace and reconciliation from the vibrancy within ourselves and the people we hold close. Adversity became the catalyst for change. This is interesting. Due to unforeseen circumstances, founding drummer Duncan Rich had to depart the band midway through the album's writing and recording process. So, SOM took the remainder of 2023 to reshape and refocus, eventually re-recording most of the album, as bassist Justin Forrest moved to drums, singer Will Benoit moved from guitar to bass, and this new configuration allowed guitarists Joel Reynolds and Mike Respash Neves to paint in even broader strokes, creating ever more dense, lush and ethereal soundscapes, while Benoit's vocals explore a fleeting intimacy balance between soaring falsettos and gritty vocal stabs. The result is a raw yet richly melodic album that takes the listener on a journey through the depths of human emotion, ultimately guiding us towards growth and enlightenment. As they approached this new material, the members of SOM found themselves in a fresh headspace, armed with a newfound maturity. Let the Light In is SOM's testament to resilience and evolution. Born from challenge and change, the album pulses with confidence and catharsis, imploring the listener and the band themselves to traverse the darkness and find the light. The album was engineered, mixed, and mastered by SOM vocalist Will Benoit at the Radar Studio in Clinton, with additional synth on The Light by Leslie Hong. So, some interesting factoids coming out of that fresh release.
Like we'd been in a band before. What happened when we all swapped instruments? It sounded shite.
It was horrific. Wow. Terrible idea.
No, you play the drums.
Yeah, that's...
Come on, it'll be a laugh. Laugh is not what I would call it.
For who?
The sound of tortured animals was better. Yeah.
Ooh.
So...
Well...
Can't be bastards, eh?
Yeah. We reviewed the previous album, The Shape of Everything. Both really enjoyed that album. I went back and looked at the scores today, because sometimes we review stuff and we're like, what did we score?
Like, what did we score that?
So I looked at that today. You scored it marginally higher than me. And I think you were like very frustrated. I remember you being like frustrated because you felt like it was so close to being like perfect, but there was something missing. You couldn't quite put your finger on, just for the band to take it to that like top tier. So with Let the Light In, have things gotten better? Have things got worse? Or have things stayed the same, Duncan? What are you thinking?
Ladies and gentlemen, you see how we set it like a pro. Almost as if we've been doing this for a while. So, SOM. Now, I knew we'd reviewed something from them.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say I ever went back to it, though, if I'm honest, which is bizarre because having checked, and I think you're right, I think I gave it a 4.5. I think it was teetering on greatness for me.
Yeah.
I, today, decided, after I'd been listening to this new album now for about 3 or 4 days. I've been away with work, so plenty of time to listen to other stuff. So I've been listening to 3 days settling, and I was like that. You know what? I'm going to go back and I'm going to listen to that previous album.
All right. Okay.
And very quickly, I realised that I was completely confused because that previous album's a covers album.
Oh, the Depeche Mode thing.
Yeah, which we did not review.
No.
I'm like that. I know we've done SOM before.
Yeah.
And like it was honestly, I've never been so like, Mandela effect, when I was like, did we review a Depeche Mode covers album? Like, could not for the life of me. So after about 6 hours of kind of going like that, this doesn't even ring a bell. Ultimately found what I knew I should have found, which was the previous album.
Right.
So interesting story aside, I don't know if I knew they'd released a Depeche Mode covers
I didn't know
album,
about that either.
which kind of feels like that should have been something. I am a huge Depeche Mode fan.
Yeah.
It kind of feels like I should have just known that, but I didn't. Anyway, let's bring it forward here. So I did actually check out.
All right.
To finish this out, I did my due diligence. I went back and listened through it.
Right.
And interestingly enough, coming to the end of that listen, I would probably score it a 4.5. Like, so like time has not diminished it, has not been unkind to it. And without going back and listening to my review, I did feel there is like something missing in there. Hard to put your finger on, but the thing about SOM is that huge sim they have is just so lush with kind of 80s textures and kind of woozy shoegaze and another Deftones. But it's in there. What I couldn't remember was much about them was vocally.
Right.
So the vocal stylings on this, and we'll get to tracks in a second, but the lead vocals here performed in a very soft manner. I fucking love that. So much so that, and I'm happy to bear a guilty pleasure here recorded for everyone. Back during the new metal era, there was a band called Trust Company who were like not great, but I loved their vocals. And vocally, these the vocalist sounds a lot like this. It's that kind of breathy, kind of upper register tone that floats, is the only way you can describe it. It floats on top. More recently, we've been spoiled with that kind of vocal styling through bands like Zetra, who essentially deploy exactly the same styling. It's that kind of upper register. They do it a little bit more kind of saccharine, but it's supposed to be. Some do it a bit more breathy, which suits the music. So I couldn't really remember much about that before going back through the listen. So curious and not knowing the background to all the band members moving around from the PR, because I read the PR, I jumped into this. And at the end of the first listen, I will be honest, I got to the end of the first listen and I was like, they've nailed it. But I don't know what they've done to nail it. I just know that this feels a lot more accomplished. Feels a lot more focused, accomplished. The tracks flow a lot better into each other. And I was kind of in that position where I was like, what do you change? And the answer after the end of the second listen was, not a fucking thing. I think this is a like perfect like package of music. The beauty of what SOM do is that kind of it's the musical equivalent of someone taking like a paintbrush over a canvas with colours. And that's what I get, but it's like broad strokes of colour. So at the end of it, it's not going to actually look like a picture. It's just going to look like someone's, I don't know, recreated the pride flag or something. Just like they're like streaks of colour. And it's all through the music. There's just a wash of colour that you get. Those colours tend to be kind of greens, purples, blues. Those kind of almost colours of the kind of the twilight hours. Or the dawn, actually. They kind of capture that. There's nothing kind of, no primary colours. It's all kind of like pastel versions of those things. It starts off with what I would class as a very typical SOM effort in Don't Look Back. It kind of sets the stage if you were maybe concerned of changing band members round and the different instruments. Like, Don't Look Back pretty much says, we're still us, like the sound hasn't like completely changed. Don't expect blast beats. There's not going to be anything untowards. But I would say that coupled with the production, the first thing that hits you is it does sound bigger. It sounds grander. Like just instantly just sounds like something's been beefed up here. Flows into Let the Light In, which is the title track. A great second song, like huge anthemic, and every song has a huge anthemic chorus. Those they're one of those few bands that I can think of where vocally they don't shift for a chorus. It's musically they shift for the chorus. And it's a subtlety of what they do. So I remember berries today. I remember when I was studying music at high school, we had a kind of older teacher who was fascinated by movements in music triggered by lyrics. And the track he would always mention, and like this dates me horribly, was the Lighthouse Family, and it was the song Lifted.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Remember Lifted?
Classic, yeah.
Lifted, right? And his thing was that, like, this is a cleverly written song, because whenever he sings Lifted, the music lifts. And I was like, that's not true. And then you would hear him play it, he would play it on the piano and he'd be like, like, see what it did, and I'd be like, music can be clever. You know, like it was like fucking like Cobain spray across the back of the ball. Fucking what the fuck. And that's kind of what SOM do probably better than anyone, actually, when I think about it. Where, like, actually musically, it's the music that just lifts a little bit, where vocally it stays predominantly. That's not to say he's not changing things around.
Yeah.
And Chemicals is the first big indicator of that, like, where they've kind of nailed down, like, the idea of, like, first in Chemicals, the guitar, the kind of lead guitar work has that kind of 80s sound on it, which I love. You instantly got me in. But on Chemicals, the chorus itself is just a kind of raised version of what they're already doing, and vocally it doesn't jump as you might expect it to. Vocals actually just float consistently through it. And that's, like, it's such an interesting technique, because it kind of, on some level, if you're not paying attention to it, you're not thinking about form and structure of song. You're just actually thinking about experience, which is, like, is a novel thing. It's kind of like when you listen to classical music. Classical music isn't written with choruses, it's written with motifs. SOM are kind of almost a motif band, where they explore a central motif of music and then build around it elements. Like the inclusion of the synth work in it was like the light in, I think, or Chem. It was one of the two where the synths come in. Was the first time where I was like, all right, you've added that element purely for texture. It's not taken away from how it elevates the track and the melody it brings, but it's a textural element, and it's never really revisited, but it's not missed either. It's kind of cool for that track, kind of fits it. So what that track needed, to be honest. Otherwise, I would argue it was maybe a little bit samey. But Chemicals, anyway, track 3 was the first big indicator to me that we were on to this new beast in the band. It's the one where I start to feel, from what they're saying in the PR as well, that there is a more kind of rich focus on what the guitars are doing, specifically in that lead work, and it lifts the track. It lifted. It lifts the track right up and, like, kind of broadens it out. And the album just continues to get fucking better, like, track by track. And one of these ones where track by track the album just gets stronger. The Place That I Belong is a beautiful track, like weirdly hypnotic and kind of somber in bits. Give Blood, I loved the lyrics in Give Blood, kind of haunting, but at the same time kind of melancholic. Nightmares might be like the pièce de résistance from this one, because it's a track in 2 acts, and the first one is kind of like the ominous entry to Nightmare, where the back half is definitely the nightmare. Under Streetlights kind of painted that picture to me. It almost felt like a kind of watercolor of a man silhouetted under a streetlight in the rain. It's a beautiful track. And then The Light is just this absolutely massive banger to close out on. Just huge sounding. And that's the key to Let the Light In as a whole. This album sounds fucking massive. As that Pelagic rub on it, where we talk about bands that are on that label all sound like they should be playing in amphitheaters and not clubs. Like, they just sound huge and important. And Let the Light In sounds huge and important. I don't think there's a misstep here at all. I think vocally he does stretch a little bit more than he did on the previous albums to that kind of higher register. But it's not overdone. It doesn't feel forced either, and it is purely utilised to suit the song. so you don't get too much of it. And as a result, those bits stand out, are memorable and remarkable because of that. Guitar work is absolutely incredible on this. The bass production is fucking phenomenal. It sits nice and thick underneath everything it was doing. And you know, like, the drums are understated, but in a really cool way. You know, the drum production is really, really nice on this one. It's warm and kind of almost analog. And it's not showboaty, but it doesn't need to be. It's punchy and powerful and impactful, and it hits all the right things, all the right beats in the right place. By the time I got to like the fifth listen, I've rinsed this one by the way. Time I got to the like end of the fifth listen, I kind of realised that SOM are almost the sort of, this is an anytime band. Like I can see myself easily coming back to this, maybe more than I did with the previous one, which dropped off my radar probably after the first couple of months. This one feels like it's going to be a delight to come back throughout the year and easily come back to each time. It does kind of, and I keep throwing this band out just because I want to see them. I do kind of feel like we should have a Sugar Horse SOM tour. I think that would be fucking incredible. Let's make that happen. Let's get Shure on there as well. Let's throw Shure from Paris. Let's mix it up. Let's just like I'm playing a game here, making like sets up from different bands. That'd be a fucking hell of a gig, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well,
yeah. See in your face. Yeah, this is absolutely incredible. It gives me what I was missing from the previous album, although I don't know what I was missing from the previous album. I think it's hard to put in it. It comes down to a feeling. There was something, an element in the previous one, and it might be in the flow of the album, or it might be that they just didn't fully commit to everything they're doing here. But this one just feels so confident, so self-assured. Kind of reminds me a little bit of their label mates, Clone. When Clone transitioned from that kind of grungy sound that they had, that kind of grungy metal sound, into something bigger and bolder, it just kind of felt like the band had like emerged from a cocoon and were like a beautiful butterfly. And I kind of feel like SOM have emerged as this kind of beautiful butterfly now. This is a fucking great album. I actually feel like this year is like my top 20 might not have anything super heavy on it if I get to the end of it, because all this stuff this year is really resonating with me, and it's really, really well done. So yeah, I think this is absolutely fucking great. I think there's not a note here I would change. I think it's absolutely brilliant. This is like when we were talking about Leprous last year, and I was like, I get why everyone loves the singer, but you know what I mean? It just doesn't flow, it just doesn't sound right or anything like that. This album was what Leprous wished they'd written in terms of flow. This is like got an impeccable flow all the way right through it. But yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. I am. You said that you scored the previous one lower than me, marginally. So that, did you come in on a 4?
Yep.
Right. So let's see what they've done for you then, Dave. I'm going to turn the tables.
Okay. Let's turn them. Previous album, solid. I felt like that album was a clear move forward from the first album, The Fall. You could hear like a bit more personality in it. It wasn't quite as obvious with its influences as the debut album, although there were still some there. And to be honest, I didn't have any huge issues with The Shape of Everything. I think it became kind of similar in places, and just there was a little bit more variation needed to separate some of the tracks out. But you could tell, like from their progression from album 1 to album 2, that they were just going to continue to elevate on each release. And for me, Let the Light In is another kind of step forward towards something bigger. In some ways, this kind of feels, I know they've said like it's like possibly their heaviest album. For me, it feels probably their most accessible.
Oh god, yeah.
Like vocally for sure. Some of the arrangements do feel a bit more kind of streamlined, a bit more almost kind of conventional, but it still has all the key characteristics of SOM. You know, they still provide that blend of ethereal, shoegaze.
It's interesting, their PR, if memory serves from what you read there, like classed them as more alternative than metal.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't disagree with that.
Yeah.
Like, and that's not a swipe at the band. Like there's metal elements in there, but this feels more in the levels of an accessible alternative metal album than it does necessarily like a kind of like a metal album which is a bit softer. It kind of feels like it's verged off that way, more so than the previous album.
Yeah, I mean, like there's a ton of shoegaze and alternative kind of elements to this, and then in the heavier parts you do get a more kind of post-metal kind of vibe coming through. But I think,
Dave, that's that pelagic rub.
Obviously, gotta be there. But I think the small adjustments they've made in the kind of songwriting has actually made these tracks more memorable and more distinct than the material on the previous album. I feel like they've also made parts of this more interesting rhythmically, which was one issue I kind of had with the previous album. It did have kind of a recurring feel in some of the rhythms. I know, like the last album, there was like, I think there were classes like doom pop or something like that, I think, on the previous album. Which, like, there's not a huge amount of doom in this for me. Like, it's they take some of the traits of doom and the kind of tempo and some of the rhythms, fair enough, but on Let the Light In, I feel like they've tweaked it enough throughout for it to stop it becoming kind of similar rhythmically, and again adding in some more of those kind of post-metal styled kind of rhythms in the heavier parts, that helps kind of mix it up as well. I also think the lead work is a touch more engaging on this one. I was completely aware of the lead work on the previous album. Like it did provide that, you know, that more melody and a bit more kind of atmosphere, but I think the patterns and some of the kind of note progressions, I suppose, on this album sound a bit more kind of catchy to the ear.
More ease.
Yeah,
I don't know how much of that's come from the Depeche Mode.
Yeah, I know.
You know what I mean? I wonder if they're listening to a lot of keys, driving a lot of kind of melody, and that's just kind of bled its way into their creative process, because it does feel like that's kind of more prominent.
Yeah, you can hear it definitely, and some of the patterns are very similar. Not to the extent that we're like replicating anything, but you know, it still has that SOM kind of vibe to it. A little bit of Mountaineer in there as well at times.
Oh yes.
And you can hear it coming through on like tracks like Nightmares, and the title track. The lead work is just phenomenal. I also love the fact that they kind of like teased a little bit of heaviness on the opening track, but they don't fully commit to it until like a few tracks in. Chemicals is like the moment where I was like, oh fuck. And it's such a great track, like and again a different feel to the first two tracks. It's a little bit more somber, and when that heavy guitar part comes in towards the end, it sounds unbelievable. And I think because they've kind of made you wait for it, you know, and then, you know, they've added a little bit of extra length to some of the tracks as well. It's one of the longer songs, Chemicals, but you feel that kind of reward from it when it actually does kick in. And the thing is, it's not like an overly complex riff.
No.
Nothing SOM do is hugely technical, but the kind of simplicity of it gives it even more kind of weight. Same with the end of Nightmares, which is an absolute just highlight on the album. It's like, it's not full of mad runs or like angular riffs. It is more in that post-metal realm, and it just delivers this heaviness in spades. I love that track.
Kind of reminded me, like, they don't commit the same way. I'm going to mention Deftones, but if you go back and listen to Saturday Night Wrist, a lot of those tracks end with, I think this is when they said they were starting to be influenced by Meshuggah. A lot of them end with like those detuned bow, 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 bow. Some kind of do that, but they don't ugly it up. It still fits the tone. There's still that kind of huge grandeur and softness to the heaviness they bring in. You get the drop, but it's not so disjointed that it just makes it sound like, oh well, that kind of feels like you just wanting to make it sound ugly at the end. Hangman's Chair do a kind of similar thing as well. Like they bring that in, but it's not like super disgustingly heavy, if you know what I mean. There's still a cleanness to it. I think the vocal on this album, on that track as well, Nightmares, also helps with a lot of the delivery of this album. A lot of really nice earworms on this. And for me, like overall, I think the hooks are actually bigger on this album. The melodies feel, for me anyway, kind of felt like they were hitting a bit harder. But I think his range is actually even more impressive on this release. I was like, I think it's there's moments on, I can't remember what the track was, but I tried to sing along to it, and I was like, I was like, what? I was like, oh my god, I couldn't get nowhere near it. Like, I was like, I'll need to come down like an octave or two or possibly three for me to actually reach that melody, because it's fucking ridiculous. His voice is like unbelievable. Like,
The range is just incredible.
Your family must be. Is Dad joking? No, he's just singing.
I think when you mix that in with the production of the vocals, which is just like an absolute joy to listen to, almost like the vocalist produced the album.
I mean, he knows what he was going for,
yeah.
so he's been very kind to the other musicians.
Yeah.
If I ever produced anything, you wouldn't hear fuck all from anyone except me. That's why I do podcasts.
Yeah. They also fixed one of the other little kind of gripes that I had on the previous release, which was sometimes tracks would feel like they were blended together. And on occasion I was like, have we moved on to a new track, or is this still the same track? On this release, I didn't get that at all. The intros I feel are a bit more kind of defined in some small way. It's like they changed up the kind of start of the tracks, how they begin. So I felt like there was like that feeling of separation between the tracks, but still that feeling of cohesion as well throughout the tracks. They were still all interlinked. I found it when I read the press release and I saw the whole like reshuffle type thing, I was like, right, wait a minute, what the fuck? Like, that's nuts. And when I was listening to the album, I was like, but the quality hasn't changed. Like there's no drop in quality at all. Like, so clearly the level of musicianship there is ridiculous, and they have a lot of experience, playing a multitude of instruments throughout the years. Even for Will, the vocalist, to move from guitar to bass and still make the bass like interesting to listen to. Like it doesn't feel like a guitarist has written the bass parts, if you know what I mean. Like it feels like he's a bassist. Like he's written like a bassist. Like there's a lot of this. I was listening to like the bass and the bass drum are very synced up, which is a very kind of bassist thing to do. You know what I mean? Just syncing up. But then there are moments where he kind of like just moves off slightly, and we'll start to kind of add in a few notes here and there just to kind of play off of that. But really well done. Like just it's kind of nuts that they've switched instruments on this. I can't quite get my head around that. But it might have been exactly what was needed, just to take it to that next level. It feels like a bit of freshness has been added into the band.
It's like we were talking about recently, Rivers of Nile.
In
a similar position where they've kind of had to shift things around. We saw them live and they were fucking incredible live, and I was like that. Yeah, I want an album of that. Give me that, please. So sometimes like bands rise to that. Other bands don't quite. Especially the rhythm section, sometimes that can like doom a band's sound. If anything, here the complete change of that rhythm section wholly has weirdly opened it up.
Finally, I just have to mention the real MVP of this album, and that's the production. Holy shit, man! Like this is just a dream to listen to. Like it's. And then I was like comparing it to the previous album. I was like, was the previous album as good as this production-wise? But you can hear a clear difference between the previous album and this one. This is so much more spacious, more warmth to it. The bottom end just sounds massive on this album. The drum tones, I mentioned actually, the drum tones on the previous album, particularly the snare, was a little bit one-dimensional for me. This sounds way more organic. The drum sounds they've kind of captured in the recording just sound much more kind of natural. That like vocal kind of ambience is just lush on this. It could be their most perfect production to date, to be honest. You can clearly hear the improvements they made, like not only in like their songwriting and their skills, but in the production as well. It is more polished, but not in a bad way. It doesn't feel like synthetic or too edited or anything like that. It's just it captures the album perfectly. And for me, it was just like just such a joy, man. Like the production is so good. Okay, so like we've spoken about the album. Let's get to the scores. What are we thinking? What's your score for Let the Light In, Duncan?
Yeah, there's no way I can't give this a 5. And I can say that easily without any hesitation. The previous album for me, even revisiting it now, is a 4.5.
Yeah.
This is better than that.
Yeah.
And there isn't a second of this I would change. It's weird. SOM are a band where I was, especially listening to this, I was thinking to myself, what would this sound like with heavier vocals?
Yeah.
And I kind of realised it didn't need it.
No.
Like at any part.
No.
And then when you're removing that out, it gives me heavier guitar parts. But even then, I don't think they should be any heavier than what we get here. And musically, I think they've found their sound. I think it's already been there, but they've found their sound, and as a result, kind of like we mentioned, Hangman's Chair is a great example of that. Hangman's Chair are a band that I think have fully found their sound.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I feel if they started changing with it. I kind of think that's their sound. SOM are exactly the same.
Yeah.
So to me, this is a very, very, very fucking easy 5.
Yeah. Yeah, like as soon as I got into this album, like I could just tell it was better than the previous one. And then the more I listened to it, those extra listens I gave it, like everything just kind of clicked into place. And like I re-listened to it again today. I was like, I was trying to pick faults. I was like, right, there's got to be something in here that just isn't right, but I honestly couldn't find it. Like it just felt perfect. And like it's just a real enjoyable listen. I feel like they've just nailed it on this one. Like everything just sits perfectly on this release, and it's just finished off beautifully with that production. Yeah, like well done. This is outstanding. It's a 5 from me as well. So I should have said that at the beginning.
I was like, "Where's it coming in?" This is like lofty words for a 4.5, Dave.
It's a 5. Yeah, it's a 5. Like easy 5.
Your top fucking 20 is also just going to be full of shoegaze as well this year. Fucking shoegaze, man. Just when we said we'd heard enough of it.
I know.
Fuck's sake.
What a year. So SOM Let the Light In, out on March 14th on Pelagic Records. Links below to the band. Links below to the Bandcamp. One of the singles. Check it out. I'll link below Nightmares because it's just fucking awesome.
Oh, what a track.
So good. Yeah, have a listen. See what you think. Let us hear your thoughts on it. What do you think of the new album? Thanks for checking out the review. We'll be back with another review very soon. But until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.